Despite the ceasefire collapsing in the last few days, President Trump seems eager to still have a diplomatic solution to end the war in Iran. He says that Iran wants to make a deal. Is he right?
Well, I hope so. I mean, he's got basically three options. One, to indeed succeed in making a deal. Two, to continue the blockade. Three, to take military action. Anything that will produce the end of Iran's nuclear program is what we want. That's our common goal. We talked about it.
When you met with President Trump at the White House, did you try to persuade him to resume attacks on Iran?
Actually not. That's the caricature, the cartoon picture. That is not true. We actually analyzed all three possibilities, and I thought we did it in an open way between friends and allies, and it's his decision. It's his decision. I think the important thing is we have a common goal, and the common goal is to make sure that this regime that chants death to America, that has murdered and maimed over 40,000 of its own citizens, that is shooting at every country in sight, and that has wreaked havoc on the international economy, that it doesn't get nuclear weapons.
You said just yesterday that you think that a diplomatic solution is unlikely. Why do you think that you all have such different assessments of the outcome here?
Well, I don't know if it's unlikely, but I'm skeptical about Iran's mode of operandus. I mean, the method of operating. They always lie, they always cheat, and they always play for time. Could that, with sufficient pressure, diplomatic, economic pressure, could that change? Give it a try.
Is your goal still regime change?
My goal is to make sure that Iran, with this regime, doesn't have nuclear weapons. And that's something that President Trump and I both agree on, because it would be a different world. They're different from other countries, other societies. They have no compunction at murdering their own. You've seen that. They have no compunction at pursuing the death of this great country or the elimination of my country. That's what they do.
If Iran does strike Israel, how will you respond?
I think they'll make a terrible mistake, and will respond very, very forcefully.
Earlier this month, President Trump said in an interview with a reporter that in the relationship with you, you know who the boss is, meaning that it's him. He's the one calling the shots. Do you see it that way?
Well, in America, often they say that Trump does everything I say, and in Israel they often say that I do everything he says. And sometimes, these things are expressed in the public discussion by anyone, including the president. But the truth is, we're partners, we're allies. He's the senior partner. It's the United States of America, let's not forget. And I'm the junior partner, but I'm the Prime Minister of Israel. And when I have to stand up for the interests of my country and the security of my country, I do so. But I always do so with a deep appreciation of the role that the United States under President Trump has played in joining forces with us against our common enemy that wants to destroy us both.
The New York Times reports that before the war began, that you told President Trump that Iran's ballistic missile program could be destroyed in just a few weeks, that it could be done without the Strait of Hormuz being shut down, and that there could be regime change. Now here we are, more than 5 months into this war. They still have the missiles. The regime is still intact. And essentially, the Strait of Hormuz is shut down. Why would you say that your early assessment was so off?
That wasn't my early assessment, and that's an incorrect statement of what I said. I thought that we have to act to make sure that Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons, because if we don't, it's like having a cancer, and if you don't take it out, you're going to die. We're discussing how to make sure that it doesn't come back, it doesn't metastasize. That's the first thing. As far as the regime, I said we could create the conditions to make this regime a lot weaker, but it's up to the people of Iran in the end to take their own destiny in their own hands. I think Iran is weaker than ever before. I think Israel is stronger than ever before, but I can't tell you that the regime has already collapsed. It's not. But I'll make a prediction. I think after such a chasm between the people and the regime, after this mass murder, I think this regime will eventually fall.
Did you anticipate that Iran would use the Strait of Hormuz in the way that it is to essentially choke off much of the world's oil supply?
You know, I thought they could do it, but I thought they'd also have to consider what would be the consequences if they do it, and nobody could predict that with accuracy. After this war is over, I don't think the Straits are going to be that powerful a leverage, because people will move the energy pipelines out of the Straits to the Red Sea, from there to Israel and the Mediterranean. We can unblock this choke point, and we will.
How do you respond, though, to your critics who say that you intentionally misled President Trump to get the U.S. involved in this war?
No, I didn't mislead anything. And the president didn't need to have, you know, nobody tells President Trump what to do. And when I met him before the second term, before he was already elected, but he wasn't yet, he didn't yet take office. And I went to see him in Mar-a-Lago. And the first thing he said to me, I have to make sure that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. So it's not, I didn't tell him that. He told me that, because he understands the great peril that America will be thrust into if that doesn't happen. So when we talked about the fact that after Midnight Hammer, after the first attack that we had, that Khamenei, the dictator of Iran, was intending to, not to stop the nuclear program, but to refurbish it and to put it underground in a place where it's, you can't reach it. We both understood that we had to take action.
You recently said that the U.S.-Israel relationship is like a wall of granite, and there are just some people who are looking to find cracks in it. But as you know, American support for Israel is plummeting. According to a recent poll, 32% of Americans look at your government favorably. That's a 15-point drop in just the last 4 years. When you think of it like that, do you think that Israel has a messaging problem, an image problem, or a policy problem?
I think there's been a change because of the proliferation of social media and the fact that sovereign countries have manipulated with bot farms and other things. And we can see a direct relationship between the proliferation of the social media and the decline in support for Israel. Now, I'm not telling you that the war in Gaza and the way that it was misrepresented here and the lies that were put forward, that didn't influence this. It did, unfortunately. But I am saying that there is those who hate Israel hate America, and those who hate America hate Israel. And I think that it's a larger issue that is a larger battle that is being waged here for the soul, the heart and soul of young Americans. I think it's a broader thing. Does it concern me? Yes. Yes, it does. And I want bipartisan support for Israel because I think that's a fundament of our national security.
But doesn't it go beyond social media? Because you have genocide scholars, you have humanitarian groups, the United Nations, who have all said that Israel has committed war crimes. So would you say that you bear any responsibility? Not for war crimes. I think that's hogwash. I mean, they say genocide, right? Okay. Well, first of all, who says genocide? The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court who came up with this. Genocide is the attempt to wipe out a people, the actual attempt and plan to wipe out a people, and the actual action that you do. In Gaza, they accuse us of genocide. We sent millions of text messages and millions of phone calls and millions of leaflets telling Palestinians, civilians, get out of harm's way so that we can take out the Hamas terrorists who are embedded in your schools, your hospitals, your communities. Hamas stopped the civilians from leaving at gunpoint. Clearly, and that's how we got civilian casualties that eventually went down, I'm happy to say. Why did we do that? If we had this genocidal intent, we obviously didn't. It's the exact opposite. The genocidal intent was Hamas. They wanted those civilians killed so they can go on TV or go to the corrupt International Criminal Court and accuse us of war crimes. But that's not us. We value every civilian life. Every civilian life lost is a tragedy. And we'll do, so far, we've incurred a lot fewer civilians to combatants
loss than just about in any urban warfare in modern times.
If you feel that what's happening in Gaza is being misrepresented, why not allow journalists in, independent of Israeli forces?
Yeah, we do, I think, sometimes. But the problem there is it's a war zone. Still, rockets are flying, mines are exploding. There are terror tunnels out of which terrorists emerge. And what do you do when journalists get killed? But I think people, you know, you can see what's happening. We don't hide it. I mean, anybody can use a Google map to find out exactly what is happening. This war was prompted by the worst assault on Jews since the Holocaust, with you know, the raping and beheading of women and the burning of babies and the slaughter of our men and the taking of hundreds of hostages, men, women, and children by these killers, who proceeded also to cause casualties among Palestinian civilians. They don't care about Palestinian civilians. You know, they have this whole tunnel network underneath Gaza. They wouldn't let the civilians go in there. So that's what we're fighting. And where's the world? We're fighting these horrible, massacring terrorists. And I find in New York that the mayor of New York, his family, they don't condemn them. I understand that members of his family actually celebrated the October 7th massacre. What? Against this democracy, Israel, that is being vilified, lied about, described as war criminals? We're fighting your battle. You know, Iran wants to destroy you. We're a model democracy fighting against the barbarians. And in New York City, the mayor of New York City celebrates the barbarians. And a day later, a Jew is stabbed, coming out of a synagogue. I don't think that's accidental. We should remember who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. We're fighting with you, shoulder to shoulder, with brave American soldiers to prevent barbarism from winning.
Vice President J.D. Vance recently told Joe Rogan that Israel is attempting to undermine the end to the war in Iran. And I want to quote him. He said that people in your system are manipulating and trying to change American public opinion to keep the war going on. How do you respond to that?
Well, we're not, actually. And I had a very good conversation with the Vice President this morning. And I think we straightened that out, because we're not. That's not our policy. Individuals in our system can have their opinions, but government policy is dictated by me, and that's not our policy.
Palestinians in the West Bank, many of them say that they're at a breaking point because of increased violence. As you know, a number of Palestinian Americans have died in some of those clashes. Why can't your government prevent that from happening?
I think we have. I mean, look, there have been about 1,000 terrorist attempts from Palestinians in the territories against our civilians, men, women, children, families that drive along the roads, and they're machine gunned by these terrorists. So we've been able to prevent a lot of that. Sometimes they're hot-headed, basically juvenile delinquents, about 150 in number, that try to, I don't call it take the law into their own hands, because I think vigilantism is against the law, and we're taking action against them. But put it in proportion, the vast majority of the settler community, like 99.9%, are law-abiding citizens. We have to live in peace side by side. But we confront terror where we can, and I will certainly not tolerate vigilantism on our side. I don't.
Do you support a Palestinian state?
No, I'll tell you why not. Because we had one. It's called Gaza. And in fact, it was a de facto Palestinian state. And what was it used for? To launch this horrible massacre against us. Hamas says openly that it's out to destroy every Jew, kill every Jew in the world, kill every Jew in Israel. The Palestinian Authority on the other side, supposedly their rivals, said that they're out for the dissolution of Israel. It would be a state that would conduct war against us, which will bring about the demise of the Jewish state. So you want peace with the Palestinians, but not at the expense of our survival. Nobody wants to commit national suicide.
So last question for you. Our show recently did a story about a father of 8 living in Gaza. He has a 3-year-old daughter who he said barely can get food, has no education, there's no future. He described their family as being buried alive in the Gaza Strip. And so really a two-parter. What is your plan for the Palestinian people? And when you look at these images of Gaza, is there anything you would have done differently?
Well, you can always do things differently, but I think the most important thing is you have to make sure that you have to get rid of Hamas. I mean, Hamas is a terrorist organization that if you have Palestinians who want to live in peace with Israel, they take them to the town square and they put a bullet in the back of their head. That's what they do. It's a killer organization. You have Palestinians in Gaza who are now fighting Hamas because they want a different life. They want a life of freedom. They have to toe the line with Hamas, succumb to their horrible cruelties and their violence, and certainly not be allowed to go somewhere else if they so wish. I think they should have the freedom of choice, and I think they should have freedom of terror. And for that, Hamas has to be disarmed, and Gaza has to be demilitarized. That's our plan. Disarm, demilitarize Gaza, and de-radicalize it. That's what is needed to happen in Gaza to give them a new life and to give a chance for peace.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
In response to Prime Minister Netanyahu, New York City Mayor Mamdani's office referred us to his comments earlier this week where he said that he was, quote, not interested in getting into a back and forth with Israel's leader and called keeping Jewish New Yorkers safe one of his top priorities. He has also repeatedly called the October 7th attack by Hamas a, quote, horrific war crime.